Greetings. In this lesson, we will build a robot arm that's more sophisticated than the block robot that we've been using. And the techniques that we'll use here on this arm, you can use them also on your torso, pelvis, head, legs, etc. So we're building an arm, but you should be able to take these techniques and these tools, this workflow, and apply it to other pieces as well. We'll start with a cylinder, and I'm going to turn that onto its side, 90 degrees, and we want 12. So we'll start with 12 sections, and we will bevel these outside edges. So double click both edges, right? Double click the edge. Let's go ahead and turn on the wireframe so we can see this. And we'll come to Modeling Toolkit and hit Bevel. Now that gives you a 0.5 and a 1. I can put my cursor here and scrub a number. We'll go to about 0.2 and we'll just give one extra segment. So that's a nice shape. We'll grab these two faces on the bottom, right? Those two faces, and we'll extrude. And in world space, I can use the plus and minus to make this larger and smaller. So that's about where it should be. I'll click, right, a little bit hard to see, that little dial there, put us into world space, and then we can slide this down for our upper arm. And then if we want to flatten the bottom, we can grab those vertexes and with our scale tool, scale it flat. So now we've got that flat. We'll give it a little bit of a taper there. And we'll create another cylinder. And we'll pull this down. It should be 12. And we'll rotate it onto its side. I'm holding the J key, which gives me increments of 15, and I'll just rotate it around to 90. And we're going to make this very narrow. I'll just pull it out here and we'll once again bevel these edges, double click the edge, shift double click the second edge, modeling toolkit. We'll hit bevel and we'll give it a little fraction and just one extra segment. There we go. We're going to delete these top faces. Oops. Just those two. If you want to hit the 4 key, when you're selecting faces, also a good idea just to go back and forth between 4 and 5. If I'm in the 5 mode, and let's say I accidentally selected face on the back, right, and here I am, I can't see that, and then I hit delete, and then I don't necessarily realize, oh, I had something selected off the back. So that's why it's helpful to hit the 4 key, and you can see, oh, I've got something I don't want selected. And then once you see you've got a clean selection, then we can hit delete, and we'll move this over, and we'll pull this down. I can make it a little bit wider. We want it about halfway. And we'll pull it down so we can see a little bit better. And then I need a dividing line right down the middle of the initial shape. So I'll select it. We've got multi-cut. And let's put our snap step at 50. We know that the insert edge loop happens when we hold down the control key. I've got the control key. And then the shift key, we'll put that right at 50%. And we'll delete these faces here. And I'm going to double click this edge, gives me that edge loop. We'll hit extrude, and we're just going to pull this down. Oops, let's see what happened. Pull that down a little bit. World space, sorry. So I neglected to hit world space, and it was pulling those all down locally. And you could see that it wasn't coming as a unit. So I made sure to hit world space, and we'll just taper that in a little bit. We'll grab this edge loop, double click that edge, right? Hit the 4 key if you want to see your component selection a little bit better. We'll hit extrude, world space. I forgot that just a moment ago. We'll pull this up, and with the scale tool, right, we can just flatten that out. We'll taper it in a little bit, and maybe taper it a little bit that way. So we've got these two separate shapes, right? We'll pick them both. We'll hit combine, and then we'll bridge. I'll double click this edge, shift double click this edge, and we'll hit bridge, and now we've got that. A little bit wonky, but we can hit the 3 key to see how that's looking. Now, if I wanted to kind of reposition this bottom, I don't do this in the lab. I think I had a little bit better position. I could grab, best done in the orthographic view, I'll grab all the vertices of this shape, right? And I think I just want to shift that over a hair. I can grab that vertex and just giving a little bit nicer flow to the shape. Same thing here, pull that out. So I kind of tapered a little bit too much, but we're hitting the 3 key to see, and you never want your edges to, right, when they begin approaching a 90-degree angle, you don't have enough information. So I'm going to come back to 1. 1 key is the true surface, 3 is the smooth preview. And I'm going to put an extra edge loop, right, the control key right there. And now when we hit 3, that is better looking. All right, we will duplicate this, but before we do, we're going to put the pivot down here. So, right, the D key allows us to move the pivot. If I grab it in the middle, I can move this pivot wherever I want. And if I hit the D key again, the pivot is just arbitrarily placed over here. That's where it's taking place from. But I want the pivot right in the center here. So I'll tap the D key and the C key, middle mouse button, C key, middle mouse button, right, allows me to snap to an edge. I'm going to hit undo. I can also hold down the V. Let's see. I can hold down the V key and snap, and it's snapping. So in this case, you could do either one. You can snap right to the center using the V, or I can hold down the C key and snap and drag. So the C key will snap you to an edge. The V key will snap you to a point or a vertex. And there we've got that, and I'll tap the D key again to get out of that. Now I can duplicate this, and I'm going to hold down the J key, and we'll rotate that around and down, and we'll flip it. So we're rotating on all 3. Oh, no, I don't want that. That was right. I want to move it over here. So this is how that is going to sit in there. Now this will be our wrist, so that's a little bit large, right? It's a good size for a shoulder, but a little bit too large for the wrist. So I drew a bounding box selection around those vertexes, and we'll slide that in a little bit. And we'll create a bolt here. I'm going to slide that out just for a moment, and we'll grab all of these faces. We'll hit extrude, world space, cube, and we'll scale it down, and we'll hit delete, and we'll do the same here. Could have done that at the same time, actually. Extrude, world space, click on the cube, scale it down, and we'll hit delete. And look at there. That's exactly what I was just speaking about a moment ago. I had accidentally selected that face. Should have taken my own advice, hit the 4 key. I would have saw that that was selected. Your control, right? I've got the control key, and I'm bounding box selecting to get rid of that. We'll go back to 5. We'll hit extrude, world space, click on the cube, scale that down, and delete it. And so that gives us a hole by which we'll create the bolt. And I'll select this around. We'll hit extrude, I'll scale that up, and same thing happened, right? I had something on the other side. I'll use the Control key to deselect. Make sure I've got a clean selection here. We'll hit Extrude, World Space, Cube, down. I'm going to go to the 1 key to be able to see a little bit better the size. And we'll scale that up a little bit. We'll hit Extrude again and World Space, and we'll pull that straight out. And actually that is a little bit large. I'm going to undo, and what we want to do is scale this down just a little bit more. Then Extrude, and that gives us a little bit better. We'll have the bolt extend on this side. Extrude, World Space, Cube, and I had something on the other side again. Extrude, and we'll just pull this out as if it were a bolt. Now we'll come in here and bevel these just a little bit, and we'll give it an extra segment, and you can play with where that fraction goes. We can do the same thing here. Bevel, we'll give ourselves an additional segment, and I don't recall in the lab video if we beveled this. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, we're not going to bevel that edge because it's a single edge, that's why. All right, we can now slide this bolt in. Fits in there. We'll grab these vertexes and just pull that in so it's not quite so much. And if you wanted to make this fit nice and snug, we can double click that edge and just scale it to fit. And we don't really see that interior, so that is okay. So there we've got, right, a nice upper arm, lower arm that rotates as you might imagine it would. Okay, let's create, finish creating the wrist. I'm going to grab this face, double click the face on the back, and I could hit delete. Pick that face, double click that face on the front and hit delete. And we will now bridge these to finish it off. So I'll pick those two edges. I use the shift key. Bridge, 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 bridge. Make sure you've got the proper edge selected, right? I've been making some bad selections there. And I selected the wrong one, right? It wouldn't let me bridge. I hit bridge and I got an error here. I thought I'd selected this one, but I'd selected the wrong one. So dolly around, hit the 4 key. We'll come back to this because it's not two faces, right? We bridge between two faces. We've got 3 here. We'll use the fill hole, and I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. Bridge, bridge, right? I'm just picking the edge, shift selecting the second edge and hitting bridge. We've got that all the way around. Now when it comes to 3 side here, and we'll quad this out in just a moment, but we'll come into the modeling mode, mesh, fill hole. So I double click the edge all the way around. Let me do that again. Double click the edge. I have all 3. You can hit the 4 key to see that clearly. In the modeling mode, I'll come up to mesh, fill hole, double click, mesh, fill hole, and then we want everything to be 4-sided, and so all I have to do to achieve that, I'll use my insert edge loop. I've got, right, the control key gives me the edge loop. Let me zoom out a little bit, and you can see this going all the way around. That edge loop, shift key will give me 50%, and now, right, we've got 4-sided. 1, 2, if we count the edges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll just pick this vertex here and slide it up, and that'll make the quad a little bit more apparent. This is a little bit wide, so we can pick these faces. Right, we'll pick all these interior faces and we'll just scale them together, scale that position together. Make that, oops, bad selection. I really need to hit the 4 key. I'll deselect those, right? Control key to deselect. Good for you to see the mistake though, and how you can correct it if you get something funny like that. All right, so there is that piece. Let's come up. Let me just see this in the 3. Yeah, I probably want an additional edge there, which means an additional edge. Yeah, let's put an additional edge here too. All right, let's create a sphere. And this will be 12 and 12. So come into the channel box for our sphere. We'll go 12 and 12. We're going to rotate this onto its side. I'm holding the J key to get that 90 degrees over. And we're going to cut this. I'm going to double click that edge. And we'll come to Edit Mesh, Detach. Let me just do that again. I've got my sphere here. It is 12 and 12. I've picked this edge, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th one out. And in the modeling toolkit, actually in Edit Mesh, I'm going to hit Detach. Remember, the detach method is 2-step. We select a closed edge, detach, and then we hit separate. And so now I can put this over here and this over here. They're a little bit large. Let's scale it down. And then this will just be a nice little finishing touch on the exterior of the shoulder. I can, now again, I've got, if I hit the 4 key, I'm going to see I accidentally selected something off the back. I could tell that time because my pivot point was offset. It should be right here with my selection. That it was off means something is pulling it to be in the middle. Control key to deselect. And we've got those selected. And we can just, and this time we'll just delete it. Slightly different method. And we can extrude, world space, scale that down. And then I want to put this here. I want, well, we could just make it a little bit smaller. Now, if I want to snap this, right, I want to limit the snap and make it exactly with this edge, right? I'll click this arrow, and then I can hold down the C key, and, oh, well, my pivot is offset. So let's move the pivot. I can go D, so I'm going to move the pivot back to the object so that we can snap the object to this edge. So I'm going to click that arrow. I only want to move it here, and I'm going to hold the C key and snap. D key first, excuse me, D key, click on the arrow that I want to limit to, C key, snap, and so now that pivot is right there. D key to get out of that, click on the arrow, and then C key to snap right there. So that's exactly in line. We can pick the two objects, hit combine, double click this edge, shift double click this edge, and hit bridge. And now we have a nice shape there. We'll do the same thing on this one. I'll grab my faces all the way around, probably, and you can see I accidentally selected something. We'll delete it. I'll come to the edge and we'll extrude and scale that down. And then once again, let's practice that. So this pivot is in the middle. If I want to snap it, if I were to hit the arrow here, hold down the C key middle mouse button, it snapped it, but we've got that big part on the inside. So let's put our pivot on the very edge. D key, I'm in the pivot, reposition pivot mode. I'll click on the arrow and then I'll hit the C key and that snaps it limited to that axis right there in line. D key to get out of that. Now I can click the arrow, C key, and it snaps right there. Now this is kind of big, but this is going to fit into the torso. So we'll imagine that we've got two joints for this particular shoulder. This will allow it to rotate in this axis, and then with this big bolt, the arm could come out as well. I'm going to pull it out just a hair, and I'm going to scale it down just a hair. And we'll hit combine, double click, shift double click, and we'll hit bridge. And we've got a nice shape there, right? And then finally, let's do the hook. We will create a cylinder. I'm going to pull this down and we'll rotate it onto its side. And we want it to have 6. We want it to be kind of hexagonal. So there is our potential hook. We're going to extrude these, grabbing the faces on either side, hit the 4 key, right? I don't want these in the middle. And we'll extrude, click world space, click this cube, scale that down, and we're just going to delete them. And we'll bridge. So double click this edge, double click this edge, shift double click the second edge, hit bridge. Now, let's see. That, let me make sure I've got them. That's giving me a funny result. So it looks like we'll just do them one at a time. I'll go back and I'll leave it in the, I'll figure out why that happened. And I'll leave an explanation in the discussion. But going here one by one. So we've got that bridged, and now we're going to cut this in half. So I'll double click that edge, hit the 4 key to C. We've got that loop, double click here. And again, we can come to Edit Mesh, Detach. And then we can come to Separate, and we've got the two separate. I'm going to undo that. I think in the video, I use the extract method. So let's just make it the same. So we'll pick these faces, right? We've got those faces, and we'll hit Mesh, Edit Mesh, Extract. So you detach an edge, and then the extra step of hitting Separate, or you can select faces and hit Extract, and now they're separated into two. Oops. And once again, looks like I had a bad selection. Let me see. I don't have this. Let me see. I must not have this one selected. Okay, there we go. So I was in the 4 key and I didn't see that that wasn't selected. Edit Mesh. There we go. Okay, so, and that kind of illustrates the difference. Sometimes it's easier to pick an edge loop, a clean edge loop, double click an edge, go to detach, and then separate. If you can make a clean face selection, then extract. I thought I had a clean face selection, but I missed this face a couple of times. So I could have just double clicked both edges that I had done initially, detach, object mode, separate. If you can get a clean face selection, select the faces, and you can use extract. Either method works. With both selected, we'll hit the D key, and then we'll C key, put that there, and we can see how these will function now, right, as a clamp. We'll position this. I can scale these up a little bit, actually. And if we wanted to get it right in the middle, right, I'll hit the Omni and then we'll C-snap them and then we can slide them over in. And maybe we'll rotate them down a little bit and scale to fit. We can slide that over. Now you can imagine some type of bolt mechanism, but I think this is where the lab video, yeah. And we'll just separate that a little bit and a little bit. If you wanted to make this a little, right, let's put an edge right down the middle on both of them. Multi-cut, right, control key for insert edge loop, shift to give ourselves 50, and that holds the position a little bit better. And then we've got a hole here, so we'll just double click that and come to mesh, fill hole, and mesh, fill hole, and I am going to quad that out. Let's see. I'll put this. If this is too different than the lab video, you can just follow the lab video. I put an edge loop on the top, and now I want one on the bottom. And right, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I just want this to be a quad. I'm using the multi-cut in its default position, so I don't think I do this in the lab video. So follow it just as the lab video goes. And I'll pick this multi-cut, but not a bad idea for you to see this work. I'll just click and drag, click and drag. Okay, and as long as I'm not doing it exactly, I would also want to just pull this out a little bit, give myself an additional extrusion, and then when we soften it, that will be a little bit harder. I'm going to pick these two faces again, extrude, pull those out a little bit, go into world space, scale them down a little bit, and now when we look at the smooth preview, that is a little bit harder of an edge. And you can make this a little bit wider. All right, so there is your arm. We could maybe taper some of this. I'm gonna grab that and maybe just pull that in a little bit. Maybe we'll taper that a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So in the next series of videos, we will rig this and animate it. Questions in the forum. Okay, let's rig our arm. We want to get our handles right in the middle. Right, our pivot now is in the wrong place. We want it to be up, centered here, and centered here. This can be a challenge, and so you may need to practice this several times. I'm going to hit the D key to be able to reposition my pivot. Right, I can put it wherever I want, and if I click in the middle and we see all three colors, right? Let's pull it out here. I see green, red, and blue, and that means I can snap it anywhere. So if I were to hold the V key and snap there, oops, right, I can snap it anywhere. And let's leave it right in the middle. And so that would be good for rotating this way, but we also want it in the middle of the arm this way. So in this case, I don't want to omni snap. If I were to omni snap to try and center it here, right, I hold down the V key, oops, D key to get into the reposition pivot mode, D key. I just tapped it, so I'm in that mode. And then if I were to hold the V key, right, it's snapped out there because it can move in all three directions. When we see all three colors, it's omni-snappable, omnidirectional. I'm going to hit undo. So this is a good example of I want to snap it only to this this X position, this X position. So I'll click there. Right, I'm limited to X. Now when I hold down the V key and with my middle mouse button snap there, it's in the middle, right? Perfectly positioned. Now I can hit the D key to get out of that, and I can come to Display, Transform Display, Selection Handles, and now I have a handle that I can snap my joint to. We'll do the same for down here for this object. Now it is started in the cylinder. Let's just imagine it wasn't, or imagine yours comes up somewhere else. I'm going to tap the D key to get into reposition pivot, and let me just move that. And so we want to have this two-step process. I want to snap it here, and then I want to snap it in line with this handle up here. So tap the D key, V key, middle mouse button to snap it there. And now I want to snap it in position here. It's going to be easier if I hide my polys. I'll just tap the arrow, right? So I'm limiting my snapping to the X, and then I'll V middle mouse button snap to this position. And now that's there. Bring back and D key to get out of that. Display, Transform Display, Selection Handles. So now I have a handle, it's smack dab in the middle, and it's in line here. We'll come down. We want to have a handle here, but we've already got this handle. So we'll use a handle for one of these positions to work there. So I'll just have that selected. Let's position this first of all. We'll go D key. I'll go C key, middle mouse button, or you could have gone V key, but I've got that right there in the middle, so it's perfectly centered. And then we want to snap it in position with those two handles that are above it, right? So we'll hide the polys. Right, I see all three colors. I don't want to omni snap. If I omni snap, it'll come up and snap here. I want to click on this arrow, V key, middle mouse button, and I'm snapping to this handle, but it's limited to that X position. We'll bring it back, and then D key to get out of that, and I'll go Display, Transform Display, Selection Handles. So now I have three perfectly positioned straight handles. We'll come into Rigging and Skeleton, Create Joints. I'm going to open this, and we want Orient Joint to World. So we'll just, even though they're exactly straight, we're going to use the world just in case you have a slight offset. We don't want any local orientation. So I'm going to hide my polys again. Got my joint tool selected, orient joint to world. We start at the shoulder, V key, V key, V key, and I'll hit enter. And if I bring everything back, right, we've got these handles, and the handles take priority order. So we've used them temporarily to snap. Now that we're done snapping, let's get rid of those handles for the objects. And I can do that by selecting the things that the handles were on for. So there's that handle, there's that handle, and remember that we, in this case, I picked the first of the two clamps. You can see those handles are highlighted. If you wanted to hide your joints and you wanted to hide your polys, and you could just see, in that case it would be easy enough to just draw a bounding box. So I've got those handles selected. They represent these polys. And I'll come Display, Transform Display, Selection Handles to turn those off. Now we're going to do something kind of interesting with this hand. We want the clamp to be able to rotate, but it would be nice to have this wrist be able to rotate. So I'm going to hide my joints. We're going to go kind of out of sequence just to demonstrate this. I'm going to double click that edge, and we're going to scale it flat. And then we're going to cut it here. We're going to, with that edge selected, right, I've got the edge selected, hit the 4 key just to be able to see that you've got a closed loop. And we're going to say in the modeling mode, edit mesh, detach. And remember that detach is a two-step process. We've detached it here, but it's still a singular poly, so we have the one additional step of hitting separate. Now we will round this out a little bit. And I want to have both of these selected. I've got both of these objects selected that I just broke apart. And sorry, let me see here. Have them, sorry, here we go. Both selected. I'm going to manually go into component mode. It wasn't turning on both sets of vertexes. So let me do that again, sorry. Right, we've got this piece. I'll shift select that piece. And we're going to manually go into component mode. Right clicking wasn't turning both vertexes off. So we'll come here. And I'll draw a bounding box. Shift bounding box. Shift bounding box. Shift bounding box. And then I'm just going to scale these in. And if we hit the 5 key, we can see that we're really rounding this out. And now we'll take just the top piece and we'll grab just those vertexes, all of them, and we'll scale that and pull it down a little bit. So that kind of fits in there. And we can have this piece rotate like that while these pieces rotate up and down. Now we need an additional joint, and this method of going slightly out of order just to demonstrate that we can add a joint in the chain. I'm going to hide my poly so we can see this a little more clearly. We'll come up to skeleton insert joint, and it will work better in our orthographic front view. So we want to click right in the center of that cross there. So I'm going to hide my polys. And I can see here, and I can click right in the middle. I need to really hit that middle. So that's why we're doing it in the orthographic front view. Skeleton, insert joint, and I can click and drag. Now, I hit my surfaces, so I don't really know where to drag to. And if I were to come after the fact and use my move tool, it's going to move this joint down here. So what we want to do, if we want to reposition the joint without affecting the down chain, right? Because we want this joint to be there. We can also hit the D key. So I'm hitting the D key, and I'm just sliding this joint to be right at that intersection. So the D key method also works with repositioning joints. We can see everything here, and let's parent. We probably want to be in two side by side. We'll say show none, show joints. Here we'll say show none, show polys. And I'm going to get rid of my grid. And we can begin to parent. This will go here. Actually, let me start at the bottom. That might be a little bit easier to see. So these two, if I wanted these clamps to work separately, I would need an additional joint. For the lab lesson, we're just having this function individually. But note, if you wanted this clamp to work, we could just duplicate this joint and offset it slightly, right? It's hard to see. So we could parent it there and parent this one here. And then now you've got the ability to handle each piece separately, right? We can grab that joint and move it, and we could grab this joint and move it. But that's not how the lesson goes. So I'm going to just select both of those, come to Edit, Unparent, and I'm going to delete that duplicated, and we'll just follow it just the way that the lab has it set up, where both of these are parented to this joint. I'm going from the bottom just so we can see without the distraction of having all the downstream highlighted. So that works for us. Hit undo. This piece is going right here, lowercase p, and now we can test it, right? So this is so that we can rotate around. This will kind of be our hand, and then this will be our wrist that allows us to rotate around. Now, I'm getting some penetration there, so I could come and grab this edge. I missed it. There we go. And we'll just squish it a little bit that way. And let me see, we might not be centered. Well, we're not going to rotate that far anyway. Zero that back out. All right, and this piece goes here, lowercase p, and this piece goes here, lowercase p. And we can test, we can grab, right, I don't want the wrist. The wrist is not going to rotate this way, right? The wrist is only rotating on that y-axis. So to test this, I'm going to pick the shoulder, the elbow, and then all the way down to that hand. And so we can rotate that back and forth. And if we wanted, we could position this additional joint here. This also isn't in the lab. But if we were doing that, I would probably just create a joint. And we need a grid to be able to create a joint for. So I'm going to just create a joint, just placed it out there all by itself. And we'll turn on our polys here. And this will be simple enough to position. So I'm not even using a handle. I'll just pick it and in Omni mode, V-snap that right there. Right, and then we could pick this one, shift select what would be the parent and hit lowercase p. And so now, right, we could have this joint handle this kind of action, right? So the character could move the arms out while using this joint to rotate. But the animation that you're going to create is just animating this joint, and let's get our view, this joint. So the standard shoulder, the standard elbow, and then all the way down, we're skipping our wrist joint and calling this our clamp joint, I believe. So go ahead, and that final video 4 gives you all the numbers, and create that simple animation. Render it out with the vector, same as we've been doing, and post that animated GIF to the bulletin board. All right, questions in the forum. Have a good one.